I returned home after completing my last mission. The military plane landed at Andrews Air Force Base as the sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon. My uniform, worn from decades of service, carried the insignias that silently narrated my story as Colonel Eleanor Mitchell, 68 years dedicated to the U.S. Special Forces. On my wrist, my father's old pocket watch, a constant reminder that I should always return home. The airport was nearly empty at that hour. I dragged my military-issue duffel bag, worn at the corners, while my thoughts flew to Alex, my only grandson. It had been 2 years since I last saw him, when he visited me before I departed for my final mission in Afghanistan. Now I just wanted to hug him, hear his stories, make up for lost time. I took a taxi to the upscale neighborhood in Arlington where Alex lived with his wife, Jessica. During the ride, I watched as the city slowly awakened. Streets began filling with early workers, street vendors setting up their stands, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee escaping from cafes. My heart beat with anticipation. I had regularly sent money to Alex, making sure they never lacked anything. The driver, an older man with a kind face, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Coming back from a long trip, ma'am?" "2 years," I replied, without going into details about my classified mission. "Your family must be anxious to see you." I smiled slightly. Alex was all the family I have left. My son and his wife had died in a car accident when Alex was just 10 years old. Since then, I had become his only family until he met Jessica in college. "Oak Ridge Avenue, number 215, I told the driver as we approached. The house was exactly as I remembered it, an elegant 2-story colonial with a front yard that Alex always kept immaculate. I had insisted on buying them this house when they got married. I wanted them to have a good start. When the vehicle stopped in front of the elegant house, I noticed something strange. The curtains were drawn, and the yard, normally impeccable, showed signs of neglect. The plants looked withered, the grass overgrown, and newspapers had accumulated at the entrance. An unsettling feeling came over me as I paid the driver. With firm steps, accustomed to facing difficult situations, I walked up to the porch and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed inside, but no one answered. I tried several times without success. The silence was oppressive, as if the house had been empty for some time. I tried to look through the windows, but the curtains prevented me from seeing inside. Why would there be such desolation in my grandson's home? What I would discover in the next few minutes would change my life forever, in a way I could never have imagined. "Mrs. Mitchell, is that you?" I turned to find Martha, Alex's neighbor, an elderly woman watering her plants across the street. I vaguely remembered her from my previous visits. Alex always spoke well of her, saying she was like a second grandmother to him. "Martha, good morning. Do you know where my grandson is?" Martha's expression changed. Her eyes filled with compassion as she set the watering can down and crossed the street to approach me. Her face showed a mixture of surprise and sadness that made my stomach tighten. "Mrs. Mitchell, Alex is at Memorial Hospital. He's been admitted for 3 weeks. Terminal brain cancer. I thought you knew." The world stopped. I felt as if the air had been knocked from my lungs, as if I'd been shot in the chest. I leaned on the porch railing to keep from falling. Alex, my Alex with terminal cancer? And no one had informed me? "Are you sure?" I asked with a broken voice, though I knew Martha wouldn't lie about something like this. "Completely. They took him by ambulance 3 weeks ago when he collapsed at his office. He hasn't been home since. They diagnosed him with a very aggressive brain tumor. The doctors say that he doesn't have much time left." I tried to process the information while my military mind, trained for emergencies, began to function automatically, planning my next moves. "And his wife, Jessica?" I asked with the firmest voice I could muster. "I saw her yesterday on Instagram. She's in the Hamptons, at some luxury resort. She's been posting photos of parties all week. Some neighbors comment that she's barely visited Alex since he's been admitted." My blood boiled in my veins. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and ordered an urgent taxi to Memorial Hospital. During the ride, I tried to contact Jessica. I called several times, but it went straight to voicemail. I opened Instagram, an app I rarely used, and searched for her profile. What I saw confirmed Martha's words. Photos on yachts, luxury dinners, expensive jewelry, while my grandson was dying in a hospital. In an image posted just yesterday, Jessica posed with a cocktail in hand and a radiant smile, surrounded by strangers on what appeared to be the deck of a yacht. The caption read, "Living my best life, #no regrets." The date coincided exactly with the moment Alex was fighting for his life. I had never completely liked Jessica. I always found her too interested in money and social status, but Alex loved her, and I respected his choice. Now I realized how wrong I had been to trust her. The taxi stopped in front of the imposing Memorial Hospital building. I paid the driver and quickly got out, dragging my military duffel bag. The characteristic smell of disinfectant hit me as I entered, mixed with that aseptic and cold hospital atmosphere. My legs, accustomed to long military marches, seemed to fail me now. I approached the information desk, where a nurse was typing something into her computer. "Alex Mitchell, I need to see him," I said with the firmest voice I could find. The nurse looked at me briefly before checking the system. "Room 512, 5th floor," she replied after a few seconds. "But I should warn you that he's in critical condition. Only immediate family can enter." "I'm his grandmother," I answered, showing her my military ID. His only family present, apparently. The woman nodded with an understanding look and directed me to the elevators. While waiting, I noticed how much I had aged in these 2 years. The special missions in Afghanistan had been particularly difficult, negotiating with armed groups for the release of hostages, but nothing had prepared me for this. The elevator seemed to take forever. With each passing second, I felt I could be losing the last moments with Alex. My heart raced, mixing fear, sadness, and growing indignation. What would I find when I entered that room? And what dark secrets had Jessica been hiding while I was away serving my country? When I finally reached the 5th floor, I followed the directions to room 512. The ICU hallway was silent, interrupted only by the beeping of machines and the hurried footsteps of medical staff. I stopped in front of the closed door, took a deep breath, and entered. The constant beeping of the machines greeted me, along with the smell of medications and the hum of medical equipment. And there he was, my Alex, unrecognizable among tubes and white sheets. His face, once full of life, was now emaciated and pale. He had lost so much weight that his cheekbones protruded under his yellowish skin. His black hair, which he always kept perfectly groomed, was now thin and lifeless. I approached the bed slowly, as if my presence might somehow hurt him. The monitors displayed his vital signs, weak but present. A breathing tube entered his mouth, and several catheters were connected to his arms. "Alex, my boy," I whispered as I approached the bed and carefully took his hand. It was cold and thinner than I remembered, with blue veins marked under his pale skin. To my surprise, his eyes opened slowly at the sound of my voice. Those brown eyes, so similar to my son's, looked at me with recognition. A weak smile formed around his dry lips, around the breathing tube. "Grandma, you came," he murmured with difficulty, his voice barely audible. I couldn't contain the tears I had been holding back since receiving the news. "I always come back, my boy. I promised you," I replied, gently squeezing his hand. Alex tried to speak again, but the effort seemed too great. Instead, he weakly squeezed my hand. His eyes said everything his lips couldn't: relief, love, and deep sadness. A doctor entered the room. He was a middle-aged man with glasses and a serious expression. He observed me for a moment before approaching. "Are you family?" he asked quietly. "I'm his grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell. I just returned from a mission abroad. No one informed me of his condition." The doctor nodded gravely and gestured for me to speak outside. I kissed Alex's forehead and promised to return in a minute. In the hallway, the doctor introduced himself as Dr. Harris, the oncologist in charge of my grandson's case. What he was about to reveal would make my blood boil with rage and change the course of my life forever. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry to be the one to give you this news," he began with a professional but compassionate voice. "Alex has a glioblastoma, a very aggressive type of brain tumor. When he arrived, it was already at an advanced stage." "Why wasn't I contacted?" I asked, maintaining the composure I had learned in decades of military service, though inside I felt like I was crumbling. "We tried. You appeared as the emergency contact in his file, but the number we had didn't work. His wife told us you were on a classified mission and that it was impossible to contact you." A lie. There was always a protocol for family emergencies, even during classified missions. Jessica knew this perfectly well. "How much time does he have left?" I asked directly, preparing for the worst. Dr. Harris looked at me with empathy. He said, "Days, maybe hours," he answered gravely. "We've done everything possible, but the cancer is very advanced. If he had received medical attention earlier, when the first symptoms appeared, perhaps the story would be different." I felt a knot in my throat. Alex had been suffering while I was away, and no one had done anything to help him in time. "Has his wife been to see him?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She came a couple of times the first week, but she hasn't returned in the last 10 days. We've tried to contact her, but she doesn't respond. Alex has been practically alone." My ears rang with each word. The rage began to mix with the pain, forming a cold determination in me. But now the only thing that mattered was Alex. "Thank you, doctor. I will be with him as long as he has left." I returned to Alex and sat in the chair beside his bed. I gently stroked his hair, as I used to do when he was a child and had nightmares. I began to tell him stories about my missions, the parts I could share, about the places I had seen, the people I had met. I told him about the mountains of Afghanistan, the sunrises over Kabul, the children we had rescued in our last operation. I don't know if he was listening all the time. He drifted in and out of consciousness, but when he was awake, his eyes never left me. Sometimes he would smile weakly or squeeze my hand as if wanting to tell me he was there, that he was listening. I reminded him of when he was little and would follow me around the house imitating my military steps, or when I taught him to swim in Virginia Beach, overcoming his fear of water. We remembered together the day of his college graduation, how I had cried with pride seeing him receive his diploma, the first in our family to complete higher education. The hours passed like this, between memories and comfortable silences. Nurses came and went, adjusting equipment, checking vital signs. But it was as if only Alex and I existed in our bubble of shared memories. At nightfall, after a long period of silence, Alex opened his eyes once more. They seemed clearer, more present than before. "Grandma, I love you." he murmured with surprising clarity, as if he had gathered his last strength for these words. "Thank you for coming." He squeezed my hand with a strength he hadn't shown until then, and then, as if he had completed his last mission, his breathing became irregular. His chest rose and fell with increasing difficulty. The alarms on the machines began to sound with a sharp, constant beep. Medical staff rushed into the room. A nurse asked me to leave, but I refused. I was a decorated colonel. I had seen death many times, but I never thought I would see my grandson go before me. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He's gone into cardiac arrest," said Dr. Harris as they began resuscitation maneuvers. I stayed in a corner of the room, watching as they tried to bring Alex back to life. But I knew, with that certainty that comes only from having seen death up close so many times, that my grandson was gone. He had stayed just long enough to say goodbye to me. After several minutes of attempts, the doctor looked at the clock and said the words that would shatter what was left of my heart. Time of death, 8:47 p.m. I went out into the hallway as the doctors disconnected the equipment and prepared the body. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and called Jessica again. This time she answered, and the sound of music and laughter in the background hit me like a slap. "What do you want, Eleanor? I'm busy," she answered with irritation, as if my call were an annoyance at her party. "I told her Alex just died," I said coldly, controlling the rage that threatened to overwhelm me. There was a brief silence, barely perceptible over the noise of the party. "Oh, that's a shame. I'll call you later." And she hung up, without a tear, without a question about the funeral arrangements, without showing the slightest remorse for not being with her husband in his final moments. Nothing. At that moment, something changed inside me. The acute pain transformed into an icy determination, a clear purpose. My military training took control. Identify the objective, plan the strategy, execute the mission. My last mission hadn't ended. It had just begun. What I would discover in the coming hours about Jessica and her betrayal would be just the tip of the iceberg, and my response would unleash a storm that no one, especially her, could have foreseen. I spent that night with Alex's body, keeping vigil in the solitude of the hospital room. I talked to him for hours, asking his forgiveness for not being there when he first became ill, promising him I would seek justice. When dawn came, I kissed his forehead once last time before they came to take him to the morgue. As I left the hospital, the world seemed different, the colors less vivid, the sounds muffled, as if everything were covered by a gray veil. But my mind was clear, focused on what I needed to do next. My first objective was to understand exactly what had happened. I took a taxi to Alex's house in Arlington. This time I used the emergency key he had given me years ago when I bought the property. The interior of the house confirmed my suspicions. It was a chaos of opulence and neglect. Empty bottles of expensive champagne, designer clothes with tags still attached, thrown over the sofas, bills from jewelers and luxury hotels scattered across the tables. In the kitchen, dirty dishes piled up in the sink, some with moldy food, a sign that no one had cleaned in weeks. I went up to the master bedroom. Jessica's closet was full of new clothes, many pieces still with exorbitant price tags. On her vanity, I found expensive jewelry I didn't remember seeing before. Everything screamed extravagance, all while Alex suffered alone in a hospital. In Alex's study, the contrast was evident. Everything was orderly, neat, just as he always kept his things. On his desk, I found a brown leather journal. With a heavy heart, I sat in his chair and began to read the last entries. February 15. The headaches are getting worse. I told Jessica I should see a doctor, but she insists it's stress from work. Maybe she's right. March 3rd. Grandma Eleanor sent money again. I told Jessica we should use it to go to the doctor and get a complete checkup, but she insists we need to renovate the living room. I don't want to worry Grandma while she's on mission. March 27. Today I fainted at work. The company doctor sent me directly to the hospital. Jessica seemed more upset about having to cancel her spa appointment than concerned about my health. April 2nd. The diagnosis came today. Brain tumor. I need urgent surgery, but insurance doesn't cover everything. Jessica says we can't afford to spend our savings, that we should look for cheaper alternatives. I've tried to contact Grandma, but her unit says she's on a classified mission. Page after page, I discovered the truth. Alex had noticed the first symptoms more than 6 months ago. Headaches, blurred vision, occasional dizziness. Jessica had told him it was stress, that he didn't need doctors. When he finally collapsed at work and was diagnosed, it was already too late for effective treatment. Tears fell on the pages as I read how my grandson had suffered in silence, how Jessica had systematically ignored his symptoms, and how the money I sent, intended for Alex's well-being, was diverted to her luxuries and whims. The last entry, written in shaky handwriting, broke my heart. April 20. The doctors say I don't have much time left. Jessica barely comes to see me. I just want to see my grandmother one more time before I go. I know she would understand. I know she would be here if she could. I closed the journal, pressing it against my chest, as if I could absorb something of Alex's essence through its pages. Then, with the meticulousness that my military career had taught me, I began to gather evidence. I found bank statements showing large withdrawals that coincided with luxury purchases in Jessica's name, bills from designer stores, exclusive spas, trips to resorts. All while Alex was sick, all paid with the money I sent for his well-being. But what I would find next on his computer would be the most chilling proof of her betrayal. Evidence that would change the entire course of my actions and take my search for justice to a completely new level. On Alex's computer, protected with a password I recognized as our special date, the day I gave him his first watch, I found more evidence. Emails from doctors recommending treatments that were never carried out, hospital quotes that Jessica had rejected as too expensive, messages from Alex to his health insurance trying to expand his coverage. I also found something that chilled my blood, screenshots of Jessica's conversations with her friends, where she talked about Alex as a lost cause and her plans to enjoy life while she could. In one of them, dated just a week after the diagnosis, Jessica wrote, "The doctors say there's no cure anyway. Why spend on useless treatments when we can make the most of the time left?" But the most disturbing thing was an email sent by Jessica to a friend where they openly discussed plans for when Alex was no longer there. They talked about selling the house, a trip to Europe, even potential new partners. All calculated, all planned, while my grandson fought for his life. With each document I found, with each piece of evidence of Jessica's betrayal, my determination strengthened. It wasn't just about justice for Alex. It was about making sure Jessica wouldn't benefit one more cent from my grandson's suffering. I saved all the documents in my military briefcase, along with Alex's journal and some photographs I found in his desk. Him and me at his graduation, us at the beach when he was a child, a recent photo where he already looked thin and pale, with Jessica beside him looking at her phone instead of at the camera. Before leaving, I entered Alex's room one last time. Unlike the rest of the house, it was orderly and clean, as if no one had slept there in weeks. On his bedside table, I found something that made me smile through tears. The old pocket watch I had given him when he turned 15, a replica of the one my father gave me. I carefully took it and put it in my pocket, next to mine.
With my bag and the briefcase full of evidence, I went directly to the office of my old friend, General Johnson, now director of the Military Financial Unit. We had served together on several missions, and I knew I could trust him. His office was in a discreet building in the city center. When I announced myself, they let me in immediately. Johnson, a stocky man with gray hair and a penetrating gaze, stood to receive me. His expression changed when he saw my face. "Eleanor, what's happened?" he asked, indicating that I should sit down. "Alex has died," I replied simply, and proceeded to tell him the whole story, from my return to the documents I had found. Johnson listened without interrupting, his expression becoming grimmer with each detail. When he finished, he pounded his desk with a fist. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry about your grandson," he said with sincere compassion. "What can I do to help you?" "I need to block all accounts and cards linked to Alex and Jessica," I replied with determination. "Jessica doesn't deserve to benefit one more day from my grandson's money." Johnson nodded and picked up the phone. With a few orders, he set in motion the process that would freeze all financial assets. "This is temporary," he explained. "You'll need a court order to make it permanent. I recommend you hire a good lawyer immediately." "Do you know anyone?" I asked. "Davidson, Richard Davidson. He's relentless and honest. I'll call him right now." That same afternoon, all of Alex and Jessica's bank accounts were frozen. I hired lawyer Davidson, a middle-aged man with a stern expression and an impeccable reputation, known for his relentless sense of justice. After reviewing the evidence I had gathered, he nodded confidently. "We have a solid case, Colonel Mitchell. We'll file a lawsuit for criminal negligence and misappropriation of funds. With your financial power over your grandson's accounts and this evidence, I can get the court to rule in our favor." It wasn't long before Jessica discovered what I had done. That night, while organizing the documents for Alex's funeral in the hotel room where I was staying, my phone rang. It was her, and what would happen next would unleash a silent war that would change our lives forever. "What have you done, you old witch?" she screamed as soon as I answered. "My card was declined at the hotel. All the accounts are blocked."
"Justice," I replied simply, with the same cold voice I used during interrogations in my missions. "Enjoy your last night of luxury, Jessica. Tomorrow you're back to reality." "You can't do this to me. I'm Alex's widow. I have rights." "Rights are earned, and you lost all of yours when you abandoned my grandson while he was dying. I'll see you in court." I hung up without waiting for her response. Her threats and screams meant nothing to me. I had faced guerrillas, terrorists, and warlords. A greedy, selfish woman didn't scare me in the least. The court case was surprisingly quick. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements showing extravagant spending coinciding with the dates of Alex's hospitalization, testimony from medical staff confirming that no one visited my grandson, Alex's journal documenting how Jessica ignored his symptoms for months, and the messages where she herself admitted her negligence. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, listened attentively to both sides. Jessica appeared in a somber black dress with a grieving expression, playing the role of the heartbroken widow. Her lawyer argued that she had been a devoted wife, that the expenses were part of the necessary comfort during difficult times, and that I, as a retired military officer with possible post-traumatic stress, was exaggerating the situation. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up with the dignity my years of service had taught me. I wore my full dress uniform with all my medals and decorations. "Your Honor," I began, "I'm not here as a soldier, but as a grandmother who found her grandson dying alone while the person who should have been caring for him spent the money intended for his treatment on parties and luxuries. I don't seek revenge. I seek justice for Alex, so that his memory won't be tarnished by greed and negligence." I presented each piece of evidence meticulously, with the precision that characterized me. When I showed the screenshots of Jessica's messages to her friends, a murmur ran through the courtroom.
Her face, previously composed in a mask of grief, now showed barely contained rage. The judge ruled in my favor on all points. Jessica lost all rights to Alex's property. Her face, distorted by fury as she left the courtroom, contrasted with the calm I felt. It wasn't happiness. How could it be without Alex? But the satisfaction of knowing I had done the right thing, that I had protected my grandson's legacy. "You will pay for this, Eleanor," Jessica hissed when we crossed paths at the exit. "No one humiliates me like this." I looked her directly in the eyes, without fear. "You have already paid, Jessica, with your dignity and your credibility, and that's just the beginning of what you deserve." She left with her lawyer, leaving me alone with Davidson, who put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Colonel. Your grandson would be proud." In the days that followed, I took care of Alex's funeral arrangements. It was a simple but dignified service with military honors that I arranged through my contacts. Several of Alex's work colleagues attended, along with some neighbors and friends from college. Jessica didn't show up. During the ceremony, I held the 2 pocket watches in my hands, mine and Alex's, symbols of a time that had escaped us, of promises we couldn't quite fulfill. As the coffin descended, I placed a single white rose on it and whispered my last promise. "Rest, my boy. Your life will have a purpose." With the recovered money and Alex's military insurance compensation, I made the most important decision after his death. I wouldn't allow his suffering to be in vain. I couldn't bring him back, but I could ensure that his name meant something, that his memory would help others facing the same struggle he did. What would happen next would change not only my life, but the lives of many others, proving that even from the darkest tragedy, a light of hope can be born. I founded the Alex Mitchell Foundation for brain tumor patients without resources. I converted part of the house in Arlington into offices for the foundation, transforming that space that had witnessed so much neglect into a place of hope. I made sure every penny went to treatments, research, and support for affected families. Alex's study became my office, where I spent hours reviewing applications, coordinating with hospitals, and ensuring that the money reached those who truly needed it. Many nights I fell asleep at his desk, with his journal beside me, as if somehow I could feel him close while continuing his legacy. The first weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I contacted the best oncologists specializing in brain tumors, established protocols for selecting beneficiaries, and created a transparent system for administering the funds. My military experience in logistics proved invaluable in organizing everything efficiently. Soon, the Alex Foundation began supporting its first patients. I especially remember Joseph, a young math teacher with a glioblastoma similar to Alex's. Thanks to early detection and the foundation's support, he was able to access an experimental treatment that gave him 2 more years of life, enough time to see his daughter born and leave recorded messages of love that would accompany her throughout her life. Each successful case eased my pain a little bit, as if each life saved in Alex's name somehow compensated for his loss. But the nights were still difficult. In the solitude of the hotel room where I was staying temporarily, the memories came back strongly. Alex as a small child running on the beach, teenage Alex proud with his first watch, adult Alex hugging me before my last mission, and always, inevitably, Alex in that hospital bed telling me he loved me before departing. A month after establishing the foundation, I decided to visit Children's Memorial Hospital, where we had begun funding an early detection program for brain tumors in underprivileged children. I wanted to see personally how it was working to ensure our support was making a difference.
The hospital director, Dr. Mendez, received me warmly and guided me through the facilities, showing me the new equipment acquired thanks to the foundation and introducing me to the medical staff involved in the program. "The results are already notable, Colonel Mitchell," he explained as we walked down a colorful hallway decorated with children's drawings. "We've detected 2 cases at early stage that probably would have gone unnoticed until it was too late. Those children now have real possibilities of cure." I felt a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. Alex didn't have that opportunity, but others would, thanks to him. But none of us could imagine that that day, in that very hospital, I would find something that would completely change the course of my life. As we toured the pediatric oncology section, my attention was drawn to a small, solitary figure. In a room at the end of the hallway, sitting by the window, I saw a girl of about 7 years old. Her hair had begun to fall out due to chemotherapy, but her large, expressive eyes shone with a strength that instantly reminded me of Alex when he was little. She was alone, hugging an old, worn teddy bear, looking out the hospital garden with a contemplative expression, too serious for someone her age. "Who is that girl?" I asked Dr. Mendez. "Sophia Williams," he replied in a low voice. "An especially sad case. She lost her parents in an accident 6 months ago. She has no other family. She's under state custody while receiving treatment for a brain tumor. Fortunately, it was detected in time and she's responding well, but she's alone." I completed the sentence, feeling an immediate connection with the little one. The doctor nodded. "Social services come to see her regularly, but you know how the system is. Too many cases, too little staff." I approached the door of the room, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. I knocked softly and entered when the girl turned her head toward me. "Hello, I'm Eleanor." I introduced myself with a gentle smile, approaching slowly so I not to frighten her. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she replied, with a shy but clear voice, studying me with her large brown eyes. "Are you a doctor?" I sat in the chair next to her bed at a respectful distance. "No, I hesitated for a moment, not knowing exactly how to define myself. "Just a grandmother who's come to visit the hospital." Sophia hugged her teddy bear tighter, as if seeking protection. "I don't have a grandmother," she said with a frankness that disarmed me. "Or parents. The accident took them, and now it's just me and this tumor the doctors are trying to remove." Her sincerity hit me like a gust of wind. There was no self-pity in her voice, just a serene acceptance of her reality that was heartbreaking in someone so young. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment of silence. "Of course, Sophia." "Why do you wear that uniform with so many medals? Are you a hero?" I smiled at the unexpected question. I had forgotten I was still wearing my dress uniform, the same one I had worn in court. "I'm not a hero," I answered honestly, "just a soldier who did her job as best she could." "My dad said soldiers protect people," she commented, her eyes shining with a happy memory. "Did you protect people?" "I tried," I replied, feeling a pang as I thought of Alex, whom I couldn't protect when he needed me most. I stayed with Sophia all afternoon. I told her adapted stories from my days in the Army, about rescue missions, about the remote places I had visited. I omitted the violent details, of course, focusing on moments of courage, camaraderie, overcoming. I told her how there is always hope even in the darkest moments, how life can surprise us when we least expect it. Sophia listened with absolute attention, asking occasional questions that revealed a sharp intelligence. Sometimes she smiled, a luminous smile that completely transformed her face, emaciated by the disease. When it was time for me to leave, a nurse came in to administer her evening medication. I got up to say goodbye, and Sophia looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked in a small voice, as if afraid of the answer. Something in that question, in those eyes that had seen too much suffering for their age, touched a deep fiber in me. Without thinking twice, I replied, "Of course, Sophia. I'll be here tomorrow." And I kept my word. The next day, I returned, bringing with me a storybook I had bought especially for her. Sophia received me with a smile that lit up the entire room. That's how a routine began. Every day I visited Sophia, bringing her small gifts, books, board games, a scarf I knitted myself when the treatment intensified her hair loss. I read her stories, we played simple games when she had energy, or I simply sat beside her, holding her hand when the pain and side effects of chemotherapy left her too weak to talk. The hospital staff began to know me. The nurses greeted me by name. The doctors consulted me about Sophia as if somehow I had become part of her life in a natural and expected way. One day, while Sophia was sleeping after a particularly difficult treatment session, Dr. Mendez invited me for coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "It's been a month, Colonel Mitchell. You haven't missed a single day," he commented as he stirred his coffee. "Sophia needs me," I replied simply. The doctor looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "Have you considered the possibility of becoming her legal guardian? Social services are overwhelmed, and Sophia has clearly established a bond with you." The suggestion took me by surprise, though deep down it was something I had begun to consider silently. "Would it be possible?" I asked. "I'm 68 years old, and I've just lost my grandson. I don't know if the authorities would consider me a suitable candidate." "Your service record, your stable financial situation, and the evident bond with Sophia would work in your favor. Besides, Sophia's treatment is working. The latest results are very promising. She could recover completely." That night, in the solitude of my hotel room, I reflected at length on this possibility. Was I ready to care for a child after all I had been through? Wasn't I too old? What would happen to Sophia if something happened to me? But as these thoughts spun in my mind, unexpected news was about to arrive. News that would test my determination and my commitment to justice in a way I had never anticipated. I took Alex's watch in my hands, as if seeking his advice. I could almost hear his voice saying, "Go ahead, Grandma. Sophia needs you as much as you need her." The decision was made. The next day, I initiated the procedures to become Sophia's legal guardian. The process wasn't simple. There were interviews, psychological evaluations, home visits. I had to accelerate the renovation of the guest bedroom in Alex's house to make it suitable for a little girl. My age was questioned, as I expected, but my impeccable record, my stable financial situation, and the positive reports from the hospital staff about my relationship with Sophia tipped the balance in my favor. Meanwhile, the news about Sophia's treatment continued to be positive. The tumor was responding, progressively shrinking. Her strength was returning little by little, and although she still had difficult days, they were becoming less frequent. I didn't immediately tell her about my adoption plans. I didn't want to give her false hope if something went wrong. But when social workers came to interview her as part of the process and asked her how she would feel living with me, her answer was clear. "Grandma Eleanor is my favorite person in the whole world," she said with conviction. "I would like to live with her forever." Grandma Eleanor. That's how she had spontaneously begun to call me a few weeks ago, and each time she did, I felt a mixture of joy and nostalgia. I didn't intend to replace her biological parents, of course, but that small recognition of our bond meant a lot to both of us. 3 months after meeting Sophia, I received the call that I had been waiting for. My guardianship request had been approved. I could take her home as soon as the doctors considered she was ready to continue her treatment as an outpatient. That afternoon, when I went to visit her, I brought a small cake to celebrate. As we shared it, I finally told her, Sophia, I have important news to give you, I began, trying to control my emotion. If you want, when you leave the hospital, you'll come to live with me. I'll be your legal guardian. Her eyes opened wide, processing the information. Forever? She asked with a trembling voice. Forever, I confirmed. We'll be family, you and I. The girl dropped her fork and with an energy I hadn't seen in her in months, threw herself into my arms. I felt her tears wet my blouse as I carefully hugged her, conscious of her fragility. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered between sobs. I was so afraid of going to an orphanage. I held her against me, silently promising myself that she would never have to feel that fear again. Just when it seemed that our lives were beginning to find a new balance, I received news that threatened to shake the foundations of everything I had built. Jessica hadn't given up, and what she was about to do would test my mettle and determination like never before.
With time, the doctors confirmed that Sophia's treatment was working extraordinarily well. The tumor had reduced significantly, and although she would still need regular follow-up and some less intense chemotherapy sessions, she could continue her recovery outside the hospital. The day Sophia left the hospital, I took her home, the house that had been Alex's. Her room was ready, painted yellow with stars on the ceiling, as she had told me she liked. I had filled it with books, toys, and small details to make her feel welcome. A moon-shaped lamp, constellation-patterned curtains, and a desk where she could draw and study when she felt better. "Is this for me?" she asked with wide eyes as she entered the room, firmly holding her old teddy bear. "All for you, little one," I replied, holding back tears as I saw her expression of amazement. "This is your home now." Sophia toured the room, touching each object with reverence, as if afraid it would disappear if she let go. When she reached the desk, she noticed a framed photograph. "Who is that?" she asked, pointing to the image of Alex, smiling at his college graduation. "That's Alex, my grandson," I replied, approaching. "He lived here before." "Where is he now?" "He passed away a few months ago," I explained gently. "He had a disease similar to yours, but they couldn't detect it in time." Sophia looked at the photograph with a solemn expression, much more mature than her 7 years would suggest. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she said, taking my hand with hers, small and warm. "It must be very sad." "It is," I admitted. "But having someone to care for, someone to love, makes the pain more bearable." That night, while Sophia slept in her new room, I quietly entered Alex's study, which I now used to manage the foundation. I opened the drawer where I kept his collection of antique watches, his passion since childhood. Each one had a story, a memory associated with it. Alex collected them inspired by my old pocket watch, starting his own tradition. I took the most special one, a pocket watch similar to mine, which Alex had restored with his own hands. He had found it in an antique market, rusted, and apparently unusable. He spent months cleaning it, studying its mechanism, replacing parts until it worked perfectly again. He was so proud when he showed it to me, explaining every detail of the process with enthusiasm. The next morning, as we had breakfast, I gave it to Sophia. "This was Alex's, my grandson," I explained, placing the watch in her small hands. "He repaired it himself. He would have wanted you to have it." Sophia held it with reverence, carefully opening it to see its interior, where the gears moved with precision. "It's beautiful," she murmured, running her fingers over the polished surface. "I'll take very good care of it, I promise." "I know you will," I smiled. "And someday, when you're older, I'll tell you all the stories behind each watch he collected." "Will you tell me more about him?" she asked, closing the watch and pressing it against her chest. "I'd like to know him through your stories."
Every day, I promise, Alex will always be part of our family. The following months brought a completely new routine to my life. After decades of military service with its strict discipline and unpredictable missions, now my days revolved around much simpler but equally important things: preparing breakfast for Sophia, taking her to her medical appointments, helping her with schoolwork when she finally was able to attend classes part-time. The Alex Mitchell Foundation grew more than I ever imagined. In 2 years, we had helped more than 100 families, funded promising research on experimental treatments, and established an early detection protocol that had already saved lives. I hired staff to handle the day-to-day operations, but I continued to personally supervise every important aspect. It was Alex's legacy, and I would ensure it remained true to its original purpose. One morning, I received a call that chilled my blood. It was Davidson, my lawyer, with concerning news. "Colonel Mitchell, Jessica has filed a lawsuit against you. She alleges that you manipulated Alex in his final days to change his will, and that you've diverted funds that legitimately belong to her." "That's ridiculous," I replied, feeling rage reignite within me. "We have evidence of everything." "I know, but she's hired a very aggressive law firm. They're willing to go all the way, and they're even questioning your fitness to be Sophia's guardian." I looked out to the garden, where Sophia was playing with a ball, her hair beginning to grow back, her smile becoming more frequent. How dare Jessica threaten the stability we had worked so hard to build? "Prepare for battle, Davidson," I said with determination. "This time it's not just for Alex. It's for Sophia, too." What Jessica didn't know is that when you threaten a soldier's family, especially an innocent child, you face a determination that transcends any obstacle. And I was willing to do whatever it took to protect what was left of my family. Sophia recovered completely. Her hair grew back stronger and brighter than before, forming chestnut curls that framed her now healthy and smiling face. Regular medical checkups confirmed what we could already see. She was defeating the cancer that had threatened her life. As she regained strength, Sophia developed a vibrant and curious personality. She loved drawing, reading, and surprisingly, collecting antique watches, inspired by Alex's collection. Together, we visited antique markets on weekends, looking for interesting pieces for her growing collection. She also showed interest in the foundation. At 9 years old, she joined a group of young volunteers who visited hospitalized children, bringing them the same comfort she had received. Seeing Sophia, who had been through so much, offering comfort to other sick children, filled me with indescribable pride. Every afternoon, Sophia and I would sit on the back porch, where I had planted bougainvilleas that now flowered exuberantly, covering the wall with explosions of red and purple. She would tell me about her day at school while I knitted. Sometimes we talked about Alex, other times about her parents, keeping alive the memory of those who were no longer physically with us. Many times we simply enjoyed the shared silence, the simple pleasure of being together. Occasionally, I received news about Jessica through my lawyer. After losing the case, she had tried several times to contest the sentence, without success. Eventually, she moved to another city, apparently married to a wealthy businessman. I felt nothing when hearing this news, neither rage nor satisfaction. Jessica belonged to the past, to a closed chapter of my life. One afternoon, while we were baking cookies in the kitchen, an activity Sophia adored, she asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Grandma Eleanor, did you ever forgive Jessica?" I set the dough aside and looked out the window, toward the garden where the flowers swayed in the gentle spring breeze. It was a profound question, especially coming from someone so young. "It's not about forgiveness, Sophia," I finally replied, choosing my words carefully. "It's about justice and about transforming pain into something good." Sophia nodded, with a wisdom beyond her years. "Like you did with me," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. I looked at her, surprised by her insight. "What do you mean?" "You lost Alex, and you were very sad," she explained while forming small balls of dough. "But instead of staying sad forever, you created the foundation to help other sick children, and then you found me. You transformed your pain into something good." I smiled and stroked her hair, moved by her understanding. "No, my child, you saved me," I confessed. "When I lost Alex, I felt that a part of me had died with him. You gave me back a reason to go on." Sophia left what she was doing and hugged me tightly, getting flour on me, but I didn't care. That small body, warm and vibrant with life, had become my anchor, my purpose. And although the shadows of the past sometimes tried to reach us, I had learned that true strength lies in creating light where there was only darkness. That night, while Sophia slept, I took out my father's old watch and placed it next to Alex's, which Sophia had left on her bedside table. 2 watches, 2 generations, 2 promises to come home. And although Alex couldn't keep his, I had found my way back through Sophia. My last mission wasn't in Afghanistan. My last mission began the day I returned and found my grandson dying. A mission of justice, of transformation, of love. A mission that would continue as long as my heart kept beating, as long as Sophia kept smiling, as long as Alex's memory lived on in every life saved by the foundation. Because in the end, true justice isn't about punishment, but about rebuilding what has been broken, about finding light in the deepest darkness, about discovering that even after the most painful loss, love can bloom again like the bougainvilleas in our garden after the harshest winter. 5 years after that fateful day when I returned to find Alex dying, Sophia celebrated her 12th birthday with a party in the garden. Her school friends, foundation volunteers, and some patients who had recovered thanks to our programs filled the house with laughter and music. As I watched her blow out the candles, surrounded by friends, and with that glow of health and happiness on her face, I felt Alex's presence beside me, as if somehow he was there celebrating with us. Perhaps it was just my imagination, or perhaps something of him really remained, in the air, in the light, in the love we had built from the ashes of tragedy. Sophia looked for me in the crowd and smiled at me, a smile that lit up her entire face and reminded me that life, despite its cruel turns, always finds a way to be reborn. I approached to hug her, feeling Alex's watch in the pocket of her dress, where she always carried it on special occasions. "I love you, Grandma Eleanor," she whispered against my shoulder.
"And I love you, my child," I replied, knowing that those words contained an entire universe of feelings that no language could fully express. That night, after everyone had left and Sophia had gone to bed, exhausted but happy, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, contemplating the stars. On my wrist, I wore my father's old watch, its constant ticking a reminder of the inexorable passage of time, but also of its continuity, of how it flows and transforms us. I thought about everything I had lived through, the dangerous missions, the painful losses, the moments of despair, but also those of profound joy and connection. I thought of Alex, of what his life would have been like if circumstances had been different, and of how, despite his premature departure, his spirit continued through the foundation and through Sophia. And I understood, with that clarity that sometimes only comes in the quietness of night, that the justice I had sought was not just for Alex, but also for myself. I had not only protected his legacy and punished the one who had betrayed him, I had found my own path to healing, to a renewed purpose, to a different but equally meaningful form of love. My last mission hadn't ended. It would continue as long as I lived, manifesting in different ways, but always with the same core: protect, care, love. And when my time came to reunite with Alex, I could do so knowing I had fulfilled my promise, that I had honored his memory in the best way possible, by living fully, loving generously, and transforming pain into a legacy of hope and healing. Because sometimes the deepest justice doesn't come from courts or sentences, but from how we choose to respond to pain, from how we find the courage to build something beautiful from the ruins of our most devastating losses. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson I could leave Sophia, that even in our darkest moments, there is always the possibility of light, of love, of rebirth. That true justice is not just punishing the bad, but creating something good, something that endures beyond us, like the stars that shone over our garden that night, distant but eternal, silent witnesses to our pain and our redemption. The following morning, as we had breakfast, Sophia surprised me with an announcement. "Grandma, I've decided what I want to be when I grow up," she declared with determination as she spread jam on her toast. "And what have you decided?" I asked, intrigued by her solemn tone. "I want to be a doctor, like Dr. Mendez. I want to help children with cancer so they don't have to go through what Alex and I went through." Her words filled me with such intense pride that I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This child, who had faced so much suffering, now dreamed of alleviating the pain of others. In her, I saw the same spirit of service that had guided my own life, but directed toward healing instead of defense. "It's a difficult path," I told her honestly. "It requires many years of study and sacrifice." Sophia raised her chin with that determination that reminded me so much of myself when I was young. "You taught me that difficult things are the ones most worth doing, Grandma, and I have my whole life ahead of me to study." I took her hand across the table, moved by her resolution. "Then I'll support you every step of the way." Time continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. The Alex Foundation continued to grow, expanding to other American cities and eventually establishing collaborations with hospitals in Canada and Europe. Sophia, now a teenager, became an integral part of the organization, contributing her unique perspective as a survivor and her tireless energy. One day, when Sophia was 15, we received an unexpected visit. Davidson, my lawyer, showed up at home with a grave expression. "Colonel Mitchell, I have news about Jessica," he said, after accepting a cup of coffee. "She's passed away, a car accident in Seattle." The news took me by surprise. After all these years, Jessica had become little more than a distant memory, a shadow from the past I rarely thought about. "I understand," I replied simply. "May she rest in peace." "There's something else," continued Davidson. "Before she died, she wrote a confession letter. She admitted everything, how she deliberately ignored Alex's symptoms, how she diverted money for her personal expenses, even how she blocked attempts to contact you when he worsened." I remained silent, processing this information. What was I supposed to feel? Satisfaction? Vindication? Sadness? In the end, I only felt a strange peace. Jessica's confession didn't change anything for me, but perhaps she had found her own form of justice, her own way of making peace with her actions. "Is there anything I need to do?" I asked finally. Davidson shook his head. "No, I just thought you should know. It definitively closes the legal chapter of this matter." That night, during dinner, I told Sophia about Jessica. She was old enough to understand, and I had always been honest with her about the past. "How do you feel, Grandma?" she asked, studying my face with those perceptive eyes that had seen too much for her age.
I reflected for a moment before answering. At peace, I said finally. The real justice came long ago when we decided to honor Alex's memory by helping others. Whatever happened with Jessica doesn't change that. Sophia nodded, understanding perfectly. It's like you told me once. Justice isn't about punishment, but about rebuilding what has been broken. I smiled, surprised and moved that she remembered my exact words from years ago. Exactly, my child. And we've rebuilt something beautiful, don't you think? The most beautiful thing in the world, she replied, taking my hand across the table. The years continued to pass. Sophia grew up, graduated with honors from high school, and was accepted to medical school, the first step toward her dream of becoming a pediatric oncologist. I was aging, of course, but I remained active in the foundation, though I increasingly delegated responsibilities to the competent staff we had trained. On my 78th birthday, Sophia, then 18, surprised me with a special gift. She had restored one of the antique watches from Alex's collection herself, patiently learning the craft through online tutorials and guidance from a local watchmaker. So you always remember that time is a circle, Grandma, she told me as she handed it to me, shiny and functional after years of being silent. What Alex began, you continued, and I will carry forward. I held it against my chest, deeply moved by this gesture that connected our 3 lives in such a symbolic and beautiful way. It's the most perfect gift I could have imagined, I told her, kissing her forehead. That night, while Sophia slept and I contemplated the 3 watches together, my father's, Alex's, and now the one restored by Sophia, I reflected on the extraordinary journey my life had been. From the young soldier determined to protect her country, to the heartbroken grandmother seeking justice, and finally the woman who had found renewed purpose in caring for a child and creating a legacy that would save countless lives. My last mission had turned out to be the most important of all, transforming tragedy into hope, pain into purpose, loss into love. And although I knew my days were numbered, as everyone's are, I felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that what we had built would endure long after I was gone. Sophia would continue the legacy, with her own style and vision, but keeping alive the essence of what we had created together. The Alex Foundation would continue saving lives, remembering a young man who left too soon, but whose name now meant hope for so many. And perhaps that was the purest form of justice we could have achieved. Not the punishment of those who had done wrong, but the creation of something profoundly good from the ashes of tragedy. A reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is always the possibility of finding light, of creating beauty, of transforming pain into love, because in the end, that is the true essence of justice. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a conclusion, but a promise. Not just the closing of a painful chapter, but the opening of a new one, full of possibilities and hope. And as the 3 watches marked time in perfect synchrony, I knew with certainty that Alex would be proud of what we had built, of the woman Sophia had become, of the grandmother who had finally learned that the true mission of life is not to win battles, but to create connections that transcend even death. A mission that, like the constant ticking of the watches that united us across time and memory, would have no end as long as there was someone to continue the legacy of love, service, and hope we had built together.